the first of a series of interviews that AAI is having with some of its affiliates. As you may know, currently we have 64 affiliates around the world, and today I'm just talking to one of our Canadian groups. Meet David Rand.
My name is David Rand, president of Atheist Freethinkers in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada. I'd like to talk about some recent legislation that's been adopted here in Quebec, which you may have heard it, which partially implements secularism in the province of Quebec.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. Well, the law was adopted by the provincial government last June. And what it does is it declares that the Quebec state is secular. It defines what secularism is by 4 principles, including separation between religion and state. And it puts that into the Charter of Human Rights of the province. And it bans the wearing of religious symbols by some state employees while they're on the job. Prosecutors, judges, prison guards, police, and school teachers. Our organization, we support this law wholeheartedly. We would like it to go even further. We think that the ban should apply to all civil servants while they're on the job. The law does not discriminate on the basis of religion. It applies to all religions, so all religious symbols. And it has stirred up a lot of controversy. So there's a lot of opposition to it, which comes mainly from two quarters. People whom I would call Islamists, although they might not agree with that label, people who use the veil to promote their ideology, and so they claim that it discriminates against Muslims, which of course it does not do. It's just that they're pushing their particular symbols, and opposition from people who I would expect to support it, people who call themselves secularists but have taken an anti-secular position with respect to this legislation, and those pseudo-secularists are basically organizations outside Quebec. There's a real linguistic split in the country. Quebec is the only province where the majority speaks French, and in all the other provinces, the majority language is English, overwhelmingly, except in one province where it's sort of half and half. But Quebec is the only province where French dominates, and it's the only province where there's large support from some of the media and from some of the politicians for this legislation, and the population is overwhelmingly in favor of it as well. Whereas outside Quebec, there's a great deal of opposition.
Well, it makes sense to me. Why should a state employee promote allegiance to some other organization while they're at work?
Exactly. There's nothing sacred about religious symbols. By allowing an employee to wear a religious symbol at work, what the state is doing is they're saying that symbol is more important than the worker's duties while they're on the job, and that's unacceptable. The state is saying that their religious belief and practice is more important than the laws that are adopted by human beings down here in the real world. And worst of all, what it does is it constitutes a form of religious advertising or passive proselytizing by the part of civil servants. And this is especially problematic in schools. If a teacher wears a religious symbol all the time while they're teaching a class, it's a form of passive indoctrination of the children to accept the symbol, to accept the religion behind it. The hijab is particularly problematic because it's so obvious, and it's really a symbol of extreme misogyny. The niqab, which covers the face as well and leaves only the eyes visible, is even worse. And when young children are exposed to this symbol in the schools, they learn that a Muslim woman who wears it is pure, and a Muslim woman who doesn't is impure. It's a purity symbol, and so it's a very bad thing to display by a person in a position of authority, like a teacher is, very much so. And the same argument applies to all other religious symbols. Some of them are not quite so blatant as the hijab. Some of them don't have the same misogynistic message, but they all have a similar problem of promoting something which should not be promoted in that context.
Yeah, well, it would be, since they are money-raising organizations, it's a bit like endorsing McDonald's, say.
Well, I would like to point out that in Quebec there is already a ban on promoting on partisan political promotion within the civil service. That is, a civil servant may not display a partisan political symbol like a logo of a particular political party while they're at work, and that law is much more strict than this Bill 21 on religious symbols. The one on political partisanship, it applies to the entire civil service, and it even has some application outside the workplace, where there's some limitation on what civil servants can do politically. They can join a political party, but they cannot run for political office, for example. Whereas this religious bill applies only to some employees and only while they're on the job.
More power to your elbow. We want to see this bill go through.
Yes, we certainly. Well, it has gone through, but it's being contested. Contested in two stages. There was an effort to have it suspended immediately, and then there's the long-term effort to have it permanently repealed. Okay. Fortunately, the first step has completed and failed. That is, the Supreme Court of Canada went to three courts: the Quebec Superior Court, the Quebec Court of Appeal, and then the Supreme Court of Canada. All three of which rejected the request to suspend the parts of the law which banned religious symbols. So that's done. However, the main case remains. There is still a suit against to actually repeal the entire bill permanently, as opposed to just a temporary suspension. And that has yet to go before the courts. And this is very well financed by the enemies of secularism, including the Council of Canadian Muslims, and unfortunately with the support of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. I think it's absolutely shameful that a civil liberties organization would contest such good progressive secular legislation, because what Bill 21 does is it extends civil rights by guaranteeing, at least in parts of the civil service, by guaranteeing that users of the civil service and students in public schools have a right to services and schooling without this passive advertising, this passive proselytizing. That extends human rights. It helps to protect the freedom of conscience of those users and students. Now, as I said earlier, we think it should apply to the entire civil service, but at least it applies to those in positions of authority, which is an excellent first step.
Absolutely. Let's hope that things go the way we want them to go. David?
Yes, we're going to be following this court case very closely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.